And right here, please. Right here, please. Thank you.
So you're in the director's chair these days.
Yeah. I think I was all we could afford.
How was the experience jumping from being a screenwriter to director?
It was fantastic, actually. And I felt a connection with this script. The producer suggested that I direct it, and I did. But I was surrounded by a great crew, a great cast. They really made it a pleasure. The experience was great. And the thing is, as a writer, I don't write things that are meant to be read. I write things that are meant to be performed. So even in the past, when I've been done writing it, I've always been heavily involved with the production. But I'm not done wanting to work with great directors, but I think I'll direct more myself. It wasn't during production, but there's something called the suicide cut, which is the first time you see the editor's assembly of the movie, and you look at it and you think, did I do anything right at all? But then you work on it every day, and it starts to become what you hoped it would be. It's an incredible story. Molly Bloom came about 100 yards from making the U.S. Olympic ski team, but a freak accident just blew her right off the course, both literally and metaphorically. She had been headed for Harvard Law School. She really had a golden future laid out in front of her. But instead of doing all that, she decided to take a year off. She came to L.A. and started serving cocktails at an underground poker game that was filled with a lot of movie stars and a lot of bigwigs. Ultimately, she took over the game, and she became the biggest game runner in the world. She ran games where people routinely won and lost millions of dollars on just one hand. And the FBI became very interested in her, and the story just gets good from there.
Well, welcome to the 40th Mill Valley Film Festival.
It's really great to be here. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor and extreme pleasure for us to be able to show Molly's Game. It has so many different elements that we recognize: the wit, the humor, the intelligence. But there's something about this story that just is incredible, and I think we could all make guesses about what that would be. But I would love to hear it from your words. What was it that, after all these years, I look at the credits for writing, just on, and producing, and even acting, but I only see the one credit for directing. And what was it about this story that made you want to direct it?
I think I was all we could afford. I didn't write the script with the intention of directing it. I didn't say I'm going to write something for myself to direct. When I finish writing something, I always want the best possible director to direct it. And I met with, just a few days after I turned in the first draft, I met with the producers at a restaurant, and we had in front of us a piece of paper with a list of directors on it, and we went through the pros and cons of each director. And when we got to the end of the list, the producers, Mark Gordon and Amy Pascal, said, "But we think you should direct it." And they gave me about 2 weeks to think about it. I spoke to some directors that I know and respect, some writers who had turned into writer-directors, and they were encouraging. But the reason I said yes, the reason I did it, was because I thought that there was a chance that this time around I was the best director for it. And I was seeing things very clearly when I was writing them, as opposed to kind of, usually I hear a screenplay and I leave visual elements up to the director for the most part. But in this case, it was kind of fully formed. But the biggest reason is that I was worried that there would be a Stephen Sondheim says, there's a reason for this transition. Stephen Sondheim says that he doesn't worry about writing a bad song, he worries about writing the wrong song, okay? And I was concerned not that someone else was going to make a bad movie and I was going to make a good one, but rather that someone else was going to make the wrong movie. That every time I heard Molly's story talked about in the tabloids, by other people, even in her own book, there's a gravitational pull toward the shiny objects in the story. The glamour, the decadence, the money, the Hollywoodness, the sex, and you know, I wanted all of that stuff to be the backdrop against which a more emotional story was told. And it wasn't until I met Molly and got to know her that I realized that there was a much more emotional story available, and that Molly was an honest-to-God movie hero.
Yeah, she certainly was. And there's something that a friend of mine has said, Michael Pritchard, who's a comedian, that I think it applies certainly to Molly, was if you want to make God laugh, tell him you made plans.
Yeah.
So
that's exactly right, and that's what the first 8 minutes of the movie are about, right? She's standing at the top of this mountain and tells us exactly what the rest of her life is going to be like. She's going to Harvard Law School with an Olympic medal around her neck. And when she gets out, she's going to start a foundation that's going to seed entrepreneurial women. This young woman has a gold-plated future in front of her. What she doesn't realize that she also has in front of her is a frozen stick in the ground. That's all. And all of us, each and every one of us, have tripped over sticks in our lives, multiple sticks. And what matters is how you recover from that. Well, in Molly's case, she both literally and metaphorically flew off course, right? I mean, I had her bust through that fence, and it took her 12 years to stop.
I'm certainly not a therapist, and I'm certainly not Kevin Costner, but I do see a lot about the father-daughter relationship. Both I understand you're a father, and in this film, and it's really the emotional aspect of the whole film. I mean, I stand back there and I'm trying to hold it back, just coming in like 5 minutes before the end. That's a sign something's working. And how important was that to you, to the story and to you personally?
Well, it became clear to me pretty quickly. Basically, let me tell you how I met Molly quickly, which is that a lawyer I know socially was representing Molly, not as her criminal lawyer. He was representing the book. And he said, would you read this book and then meet with my client, Molly Bloom? And I had never heard of Molly Bloom. I did a quick Google search. She's the poker princess. And she's, what happened was kind of Charlie became me in the movie. All of his skepticism, you don't need me, you need a publicist, that kind of thing. You're going to make a quick buck by spilling the beans on some Hollywood big shots. I went into the meeting with her with that attitude. I was turned around in about 7 minutes. I was knocked out by this woman who was not at all what I was expecting her to be. And then as we got more comfortable with each other, that first meeting, which was about an hour, turned into 6 months of meetings where she felt comfortable enough to talk to me about her relationship with her father. I knew that that's where a lot of the emotion in the story was going to be. As for I am the father of, I can't believe she's a teenager already. If you want to make time speed up, have a kid. And found myself, just like Charlie, saying to my daughter, I know this is going to sound strange, but this woman who has pled guilty in federal court in a mob gambling indictment is actually a wonderful role model for you for the following reasons. And I was happy that she and Molly, my daughter and Molly, have become friends.
And she really is a role model, and
yes, she is.
I think it's just, like the movie says, just the beginning.
I think so too. Yes, that commentator at the end says she'll be back. She will. I promise you, you haven't heard the last of Molly Bloom.
Jessica Chastain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't believe we had to settle for Jessica Chastain.
I know. I mean, what was going on there?
Jessica, I met with a small handful of terrific actresses. I would say the hardest part of this whole process was having to say no to a number of people who are incredibly talented. But I had a meeting with Jessica in New York, and she walked into the meeting, and after "hello, how are you?" said, "You know, this meeting is silly. You should just give me the part. You know that you should just give me the part." And I got scared and said, "Okay." And that's pretty much how our relationship went for the rest of the movie. I'm nuts about Jessica. She is phenomenally talented. And I think that there's a special quality about her that I think it isn't just because she's been classically trained. She went to Juilliard. She's done a lot of stage work. I think it's because she did not become a movie star until well into her 30s, which is young in any other profession. But for women in Hollywood, you become a movie star in your 20s. And in your 30s, you start to get scared. So there's I don't know, there's a maturity, there's an inner strength about her. She doesn't have to act tough, she just is. She doesn't have to act smart, she just is. She doesn't have to act funny, she just is. There would have been, it was a tight schedule. Making this movie. We didn't have all the money in the world. We didn't have all the time in the world. It was really, it was a 60-day movie that we made in, a 60 shooting day movie that we made in 49 shooting days. And the toughest scenes under those circumstances were going to be all the scenes between Jessica and Idris in the office. Because those are, on most movies, a heavy day for an actor will be if they have a 3-page day. That's a heavy day. Jessica had 45 pages in the first 5 days. Those scenes in Idris's office were 7, 8, 9 pages long of dense dialogue. And what you needed was 2 or 3 weeks of rehearsal before then. We had 0 weeks of rehearsal. So what I did is I set up with Idris and Jessica and myself about 6 weeks before shooting started. I set up virtual rehearsal where Skype, email, on the phone sometimes we would just talk through a scene beat by beat, and I just kept reminding them that, you know, you guys, you're not going to be able to learn this in the makeup trailer on the morning that we're doing it. That the more you come in having casualized this language, the more you come in having, you know, owning this language, the happier you're going to be with your performance. And sure enough, both of them, Jessica and Idris, I've never ever, and I've really been blessed with great casts in movies, television, and on stage. Just great actors that I'm devoted to. I've never seen 2 actors work this hard at being prepared for the moment. And any time there was a lighting break, anytime we were changing a lens, God knows lunch, anytime there was a break, the 2 of them would be working on tomorrow's scene. I never saw either one of them just kick back for a second. And if they hadn't been as prepared as they were, we would still be at Pinewood Studios shooting those scenes.
Wow. I just presumed you had done something like you did with Steve Jobs, where you rehearsed for weeks and then you shot.
I would have loved to.
First
Steve
part.
Jobs was a perfect rehearsal experience. You're right, where we rehearsed the first act for 2 weeks, shot the first act, stopped, rehearsed the second act for 2 weeks, shot it, and so on. But corners had to be cut to fit the budget, and it wouldn't have been my first choice to cut the corner of rehearsal. That's not really cutting a corner, that's kind of cutting a vital organ from what you're doing. But it was the only way to fit it in the schedule. Actually, not just because of money, but also because Idris, when he's not making movies, he is jumping out of airplanes or kickboxing or setting a new land speed record in Scotland. He 4 years ago, I don't mean to get into too personal a story, but 4 years ago his father passed away. And it awoke something in him where he decided he needed to live life to the fullest. A friend of his who's a documentary filmmaker said, hey, do you mind if I point a camera at you while you're living life to the fullest? Because I think this could be cool. And it's a documentary series on the BBC now of Idris Elba just, and it's not like George Plimpton, who tried these things and was bad at them. Idris is really good at this. Hey, guy is James Bond. I'm telling you.
Well, just seeing him at Beast of No Nation, was an experience.
Yeah.
I read an analogy, maybe it was around the same time as Steve Jobs too, about actors working with dialogue with you because it's so dense and witty and fast and that you compared it to a musician.
Yeah. I grew up in New York, and my parents took me to see plays starting from a very young age. And oftentimes they took me to see plays that I was too young to understand. Like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf when I was 9 years old. Don't know what they were thinking. But even though I didn't understand what was going on, I loved the sound of dialogue. It really sounded like music to me. These great actors and actresses, their sleeves rolled up, this words crashing into each other, speeches sounded like arias, dialogue sounded like duets, and I wanted to imitate that sound. And so when I'm writing something, I'm saying it out loud. I'm playing all the parts when I'm writing it. Jessica is well aware that her Molly doesn't compare to mine. It's almost a shame that you're never going to get to see my Molly because it's a whole different experience. The layers. So I'm hearing the dialogue, and I want it to be musical. And when we come to the moment when if it were an opera, when you would hear an aria, if it were a symphony, when you would hear the finale ultimo, that's where you'll find a page and a half speech, which also builds to a crescendo like music. So I don't know if I'm writing good music or not, but I'm trying, yeah.
Should we open it up to the audience for some questions? I bet you have some. Do we have mic runners today, or should I just repeat the questions? Or both? Right over here.
Perfect segue. I was really aware of the voiceover. I liked it, but that seems unusual for Hollywood, period, and from what I know of your work, period. What informed that?
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever written voiceover. I've never used voiceover before. It was a lot of voiceover, even for a movie with voiceover. I kind of kept comforting myself by saying, I think Goodfellas has more voiceover than this. I think Goodfellas does. But the voiceover is there not just, it's not there as an exposition machine. It's there because I really wanted it to be Molly telling the story and not the filmmakers. I wanted it to feel kind of like a TED Talk, that where Molly has had this whole experience, she knows how the story ends, and she is going to tell it to you. I wanted to try to get in there Molly's sense of humor that I was experiencing, and even though she knows how the story ends, every once in a while there's a moment that even surprises her when she's telling it. For instance, she'll say, I just want it to be a young and warm weather for a while. At least I think that's what I want. I'm not sure. I can't remember. A moment like that becomes spontaneous. I wanted those to be in there. I wanted there to be a clear difference between the two planes of time that the story was being told on. One is present day, where she's arrested by the FBI, has to go to New York, get herself a lawyer, go to the arraignment. Those scenes with Charlie, the scene with her father, and then the sentencing, and then the story in the past going from the skiing accident to how did she become the biggest game runner in the world. And I wanted those two things to feel different. So there's no voiceover in present day. Every time we cut to Charlie, there's no more voiceover. Every time we cut back, there's quite a bit of voiceover.
Questions over here? We have a runner on this side?
I'm curious, you mentioned a couple times about the difficulty getting the movie made, the money, and so forth, and it's just kind of shocking because you have a great story, two great actors, a great screenwriter and director. Why is it so hard to get this kind of a movie made in Hollywood?
Well, first of all, thank you. Second, I'll say that I think most people in Hollywood would say that we had an incredibly easy time getting this movie made, that it was smooth sailing all the way. There are other movies which I think pretty much everyone here would consider to be great movies that came very close to never being movies at all. The glib yet true answer to your question is that we just happen to be living in a time where a studio would rather me write a movie with a $100 million budget than a movie with a $30 million budget. The $100 million movie is safer than the $30 million movie. But I can tell, I'll tell you this, because I still can't get over it every time I think about it. Slumdog Millionaire, okay? It's a pretty good movie, right? Won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. It's not uncommon for a script, after a script is turned in, it's not uncommon for a script to get put in turnaround. If you don't know what turnaround means, it means basically the studio has decided that for whatever reason, it's not going to make this movie, so it's going to put it up for auction. Any other studio can buy it at cost, whatever they paid for the underlying rights to option the book, whatever they paid for the writer. Maybe they replaced that writer and hired another writer. You can get it at cost. It's not A Few Good Men was put in turnaround. Okay, TriStar decided not to make it. Sony and Castle Rock came along and said, we'll make it. But Slumdog Millionaire is the only movie I can think of where it was Warner Brothers. They made the movie. They showed the movie to the then head of Warner Brothers, the exact same movie we all saw, the exact same movie that won Best Picture, and they said, we can't sell this movie, it doesn't have any white people in it. And I think that movie cost like $10 million to make or something like that. So there are, the broad answer to your question is there are a lot of reasons why it can be difficult getting something to the screen, but as long as I was willing to, give up frills and luxuries like rehearsal, it was smooth sailing.
And it's interesting because we got to play Slumdog Millionaire in this theater for months because that opinion carried over, even with its success at Mill Valley, Telluride, in Toronto, that it wasn't worthy of the other films there. So they let this little independent theater have it. And that was very good for us.
I'm sure. Yeah, good for you. Good for you.
Yes.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
This question is being actually texted in by my daughter Isabel, who really, really wanted to be here, so she sent it from her dorm room.
Oh, okay.
Her dorm room at Syracuse University.
She's an orange woman.
Yeah, she is. So given that you've directed your first film, in retrospect, are there any of your scripts that you've written that you wish you had had the opportunity to direct yourself?
No. First, what year is she in?
She's a sophomore year.
All right, so you already know. It's October. You got to send her some socks. Now. Okay, send her warm socks because no kidding around. It is cold, all right? That it's not going to stay that way. No, the answer is I've worked with fantastic directors. Now, there isn't a single script I've written. There isn't a single movie or an episode of television that I've written that I don't wish I could have back to write again. Because I know if I get a second bite at the apple, I could just do a better job. But no, I've loved all the directors that I've worked with. As I said, I'm not done wanting to work with great directors, but I really did enjoy directing this movie, and I think it's something I'll try to do again. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have one over here?
Hi, back to the voiceover in the screenplay. Could you talk about, as a writer, how do you decide, especially since you said you weren't doing exposition with the voiceover, that the present time, there was a delineation between the present time and the VO. How do you decide as a writer what to put in VO and what to show visually?
Yeah, what I'm going to dramatize and what'll just be voiceover.
Yeah. Could you talk about that process, please?
It's you're feeling your way in the dark as you go. You can really only see. It's like walking in the dark with a flashlight. You can only see as far in front of you as that beam. So it's a feeling thing. But essentially, if something wasn't interesting enough. After the opening scene, after the skiing accident, the next section of voiceover is after my colossal wipeout at Deer Valley. I decided to postpone law school for a year and move to Los Angeles. I could have put in a scene there, I guess, where. Molly is telling her father that she's decided to postpone a law school year. But at this point, you are kind of under an obligation to get to it. That's not the conflict of the story, that she's postponed law school for a year. You need to get to, hey, Molly, my Tuesday night poker game is moving, and I would like you to help me run it. Okay, that's where the story begins. So as elegantly as you can and efficiently as you can get there, and then the rest of the time, it's just a feeling. The movie is on the long side. It's 2 hours and 12 minutes. And when most movies are I knew going in that there was no chance I was going to write a 100-minute movie. I just don't have it in me. Growing up at my family's dinner table, anybody who used one word when they could have used 10 just wasn't trying hard enough. So contractually, I made sure that I was allowed to turn in a 2 hour and 15-minute cut. So I got in just under the wire there. But my point is, I think that there were one or two scenes that I had to turn into voiceover simply for the sake of economy, that I couldn't afford to carry those scenes anymore. But otherwise, it was just a feeling.
I hate to stray from this movie because it's just amazing, and I thank you for it.
Oh, I thank you.
However, West Wing is it's very dear to me.
Oh, that's so nice of you.
And in particular, you
Thank
created
you.
this amazing president, and now you know where I'm going, President Bartlett. And can you help us write our way out of the moron? Any chance? I know you're very politically involved.
You're very kind. I'll tell you, I had the time of my life doing The West Wing. I think that for the 4 years that I was writing the show, I think I had the best job in show business. And I also think that the greatest delivery system ever invented for an idea is a story. This country has a lot of very good storytellers, whether they're writing movies or books or songs. I think we're going to come in a little handy.
All right, sorry.
No, go ahead. You guys are doing my work for me. I'm going to let you. This way I don't
We
get in
wanted to
trouble.
hear about that impeachment story.
It's hard to believe it's not going to unfold all by itself right before our eyes.
All right, let's get a couple people in the middle here, if you can do that. But don't hold on to the mic.
Thank you for bringing intelligence to television.
Oh, what a
first
thing to
off.
say.
Yes. I have a question. When I think of Kevin Costner and a scene Kevin Costner will do, and when I think of a scene Aaron Sorkin would write, there's a disparity there in terms of the number of words.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about working with Kevin and even thinking of him for this role?
Kevin was the only one that I thought of for the role. I know exactly what you're saying. That Kevin, most of the time, plays the quiet man, right? The strong, quiet man. Now in JFK, he did do some talking, but for this movie, it was there was going to be language. A lot of language in that park bench scene. He was going to be flawed. He was going to be somebody's father. He was going to be a number of things that Kevin doesn't usually do. Well, he's my hero. He was so generous, so great to work with, not just on that park bench, but when we were up on that ski slope, he was... He would give a suggestion or advice, and he would do it in the most beautiful way. Now, this is a guy who, when he made his directorial debut, he had to worry about what direction 5,000 buffalo were going to run when he called action. We're going to go that way or that way. He was really terrific with me. And that scene with Jessica, which we shot from around 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. in early February in New York City. I mean, it was cold out there. And Kevin was even great with the paparazzi because our set wasn't roped off. There was paparazzi right there snapping them. So Kevin, who obviously has experience with this, said, guys, how about if we pose for 2 minutes for pictures and then you clear out and let us do the scene? It's a tough scene. We can't have you in our eye line, that kind of thing. And he was great. If I work with him another 10 times, it won't be enough. But as far as language, he doesn't have any problem with it. No problem with it.
Yes, you with the mic.
Mike, I'm a little nervous because, Aaron, I have to tell you that you are
I'm sorry. Can you? Oh, there you are. Okay. No, I could hear you. I just couldn't find
sorry.
you.
Yeah, I'm very short. But I just you're my idol. I think you are the most brilliant writer in television or movies today.
That's so nice of you to say.
I'm so thrilled to hear you speak and to see your movie, which I thought was beautiful. I have two questions. One is, what are you doing next? And the other is, of all the things that you've done, what's your favorite?
I'm not going to name a favorite because they do become a little like children, and you want to favor them. Generally, my favorite is the thing that I've just done. So right now it's Molly's Game, but there is a place in my heart for everything that I've done. What's next? Two things. I have a new play opening on Broadway next season. I call it a new play, but it's To Kill a Mockingbird. I've written a new stage version of To Kill a Mockingbird, and that'll be on Broadway next season. And the next movie that I'm writing is about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
Aaron, I want to thank you for bringing this gift to us of Molly's Game.
It's my pleasure. You guys are fantastic. This festival is great. You guys you're a wonderful, wonderful movie audience. All any writer would pray for is a theater filled with people like you. So I really appreciate it.
Come back and see us again.
Thanks very much.